Hi guys, Debbie here. Today's video is going to be a tag. Not participated in a tag in the longest time. I was tagged to do this one and it's by my friend Angelica Lyremar. She creates some of the best tags, honestly. I think this is the third one that she's done and they're always super fun. And this one is the Eyeshadow Palette Collection Tag. There's 8 questions in the tag and it's talking all about your eyeshadow palettes, which is something I love to do and I know you guys love to see. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. Okay guys, so the premise of the tag is if I would pick an eyeshadow palette in my collection that represents, and then there's 8 different words. So the first one then is if I could pick an eyeshadow palette in my collection that represents me in terms of colour story. And I've picked this one. It's the So Sue by Suzanne Jackson Urban Bible palette. If you guys have been around here before, you'll know how much I love this palette, and there's a number of reasons why. It's got all those grungy tones, particularly sort of this area here, that I love. It's got a black and a white, which I find I need in a palette to have both really, and it makes it so much more versatile to have those. And it's got some super reflective, iridescent kind of shimmers, you know, the really dimensional kind of shimmers that I adore. It's got a couple of really beautiful ones, or 3 beautiful ones of those in here. And a couple of, well, that one's a duochrome, but like a lot more smoky kind of duochrome. It's just beautiful, honestly. And I think it represents the 2 sides of me. Like, I love a grungy, dark, goth kind of aesthetic, but I also love my reds and like neutral tones together, oranges, yellows to do a sunset eye. Particularly love red, as you guys know. This is a really good red in here. And sometimes I like to just play with neutrals, but kind of like the more, I don't know, grungy kind of smoked out neutrals that this palette gives you, particularly in this area here. So it's honestly pretty perfect. If it was to be my ideal colour story though, I would probably need a silver in there. I'd need a gold, and I would need a emerald green matte. And I think then it would be literally perfection, and that would be Debbie in a palette in terms of colour story. But it's such a good palette. It was in collaboration with a YouTuber, so it was limited edition, but not available anymore sadly. But definitely me in terms of colour story, and it represented me the best, I think, of any palette that I own. Okay, number 2 then. If I would pick an eyeshadow palette in my collection that represents me packaging wise. So this one was super hard. I've got a lot of really nicely packaged palettes because primarily I'm an eyeshadow palette collector, and what I go for is the packaging. This one though isn't one of these pop-up packagings that I adore. It's for other reasons that I've picked it. And I've gone for the Peachy Queen We're All Mad Here palette, so this one here, for a couple of reasons. I love my sort of dark goth Halloween kind of aesthetic. That's when I come into my own at that time of year. I'm always super inspired. It's when I bought this palette. I love Alice in Wonderland anyway. I nearly picked my Urban Decay Alice in Wonderland palette, but I thought that would be too predictable. And I just wanted to showcase this one a little bit. But another reason is that I absolutely adore cats, and I'm a crazy cat lady. I've got 2 cats. I've got a tabby with white paws called Benji, and I've got a black cat, and this one called Kuro, and this one reminds me so much of Kuro. And I mean, he's not got an evil grin like this, of course, but it just reminds me of him. So yeah, representing me in terms of packaging, I think this one does a good job. And it's a beautiful palette inside and out as well, like the mirror inside. It's got all of the pattern all around the mirror, and the shades are just beautiful in here. Again, it's got some of those grungy kind of grey tones that I love. It's got some pops of orange and then some really special dimensional reflective shimmers in here. There's a couple of really super ones of those. So yeah, that's me in terms of packaging, but also a little bit in terms of colour story too. And I do have to say I have cheated on a couple of these because I couldn't narrow them down to just one. So for a couple of the questions, we're going to have 2 palettes. But for number 3, if I would pick an eyeshadow palette in my collection that represents spring, And I was thinking about this and thinking, well, spring to me is pastels, but pastels really aren't me. Like, I don't know, I do play in the pastel zone sometimes, but they're not my favourites. And I also think of like neon kind of shades coming into their own in springtime as well. And then I think of sort of floral colours and green. And I was like, what have I got that kind of encapsulates all of that together? And this one gave me the most trouble, to be honest. It took me a long time to decide, and then I hit on this one, and it's the Sugar Pill Mini Colour Palette. I think it's got everything, quite honestly, that I've just been talking about, because it's those pastel tones but a bit more super saturated. You've got the green tones here, you've got some sort of blossomy kind of shades, florally tones in there, but not, as I say, washed out pastels, not quite neon, somewhere in between. But I think, yeah, it definitely reminds me of spring when I see this colour story. Okay, next up, number 4. If I was to pick an eyeshadow palette in my collection that represents happy. Wow, happiness to me isn't happening right now, but it's holidays. And this one was the easiest one for me to pick, quite honestly, because whenever I see this one, this is what it makes me think of. And it's the BH Cosmetics Summer in Saint-Tropez palette. And just the names of the shades in the palette, but also like the beachy kind of tones to it, like that azure blue, and then all of like the sandy kind of shimmers and the reds that I love. It's just sunshine and happiness in a palette for me. So yeah, it definitely encapsulates happy. I mean, just some of the names in here, like sand, exotic, coastline, jet set, sizzle. You know, it just reminds you so much of a beach holiday, and yeah, happiness in a palette in terms of like the bright and beautiful colours as well. And a totally bomb palette, this one, as most of the BH Cosmetics palettes are now. Really recommend this one, it's really good. Okay, number 5, if I would pick an eyeshadow palette in my collection that represents the dark and grungy in me. Now this is one where I've picked 2 different palettes. I couldn't kind of narrow it down to any less than 2 because I just felt like I would be missing out if I picked one or the other in terms of like slightly different aesthetics from me. So for the first one, this was quite easy, I think, and it's the Shroud Cosmetics Arcana palette. I think this is probably the grungiest palette ever to be created by any brand ever, to be honest. It's those dual tones but super grunged out. It's almost, dare I say it, too grungy for me sometimes. It can end up very, very dark, but some of the jewel tones that are in it paired with like, I mean, that mossy green kind of matte, but it does come out very, very dark and grungy. But the whole aesthetic is grunge in a palette, and I think it was so well executed for what the palette is all about, and really, really good quality. Shroud are closed at the moment because they're catching up on making the It's Freaking Bats palette from Beauty Bean. If you guys love a goth aesthetic, you can't get a better palette for it than this one. The mattes are super buttery and blendable, and the shimmers are just beautiful on the eyes. As I say, it does go very deep, like dark and grungy though, very quickly. So just use it sparingly, I would say, particularly that green and that blue shade. But yeah, super grungy, and I think that represents my grunge style quite well. The other one I picked in this category is more the dark side of me, the more vampy, gothy kind of side, and it's the Melt She's in Parties palette. I love this palette. It really does, as I say, make me feel vampy when I wear it. I think the colours and the tones of it really suit me. I just always like a burgundy kind of wine shade on myself. Just think it really kind of suits my colouring, and yeah, it's just perfection. There's a lot of shades that are quite similar, but you can create some really smoked out, as I say, burgundy wine, vampy, beautiful looks with this. So yeah, I think that definitely represents that side of me. Okay, number 6 is if I would pick an eyeshadow palette in my collection that represents the girly in me. Now, I'm not super girly. I have got some pink palettes. I know Angelica mentioned the pinks palette from Juvia's Place. I do own that one, but I'm not really a super girly girl. So find it quite difficult. And then I thought of this one and I thought this is probably the girliest I own, and it does make me feel pretty and girly when I wear it. And I've been hating on pastels earlier in the video, and it's a pastel palette, but it just really is pretty special, this one. It's the Nomad Cosmetics Tokyo Harajuku palette, and it's got cats on the front, and it's super cute and all those sort of pastel-y tones, cuddly little cats on there. Couldn't get much girlier than that. And then that's the beautiful shades of pastels inside. And this palette is incredible. If you guys haven't tried this palette, then you really are missing out. It's, as I say, I don't like my pastels too washed out, but these are quite satiny. Like this whole row is satins, which I think makes them a little bit more saturated. Just love this bottom row though. It's all about the bottom row. These kind of multi-chrome, duochrome kind of shades, but they're just so sparkly and iridescent, and they just play off the matte shades so well. It's gorgeous. So yeah, definitely feel super girly when I wear this. It creates a very light and airy aesthetic, and yeah, it's a definitely summer palette for me though. I wouldn't really pull that out unless it was a really sunshiny kind of time of year, and yeah, I wanted to feel super girly. Okay, number 7, if I would pick an eyeshadow palette in my collection that represents fun. Well, I've got the same one for this one as Angelica, so if you've seen her video, you'll know what's coming. I think a lot of people might pick this brand, and it's love it or hate it, but it's the Glam Light Cake palette. It took me a long time to buy this because I don't know if I'm that much fun, because I was like food in makeup, don't know if I like that, but this one is super fun. I mean, it comes in an oven, like the packaging is an oven, and obviously the whole design is a cake, and it's super fun inside as well. You can't sort of think of anything but fun when you see these beautiful shades. It's a rainbow palette, and it's just could have been in the happy section because it makes me so happy just seeing all these tones together, because they're super vibrant and saturated, and the shimmers are so glittery and special as well. I've not actually used this one yet, so if you guys want to see me use it, I've had it in my collection since kind of Black Friday time, just not gotten around to filming a video with it, and I only ever really use my makeup when I'm filming. So if you guys want to see this one soon, I think you have said before you want to see it, I just don't get around to it, but it's super fun. As I say, the concept of everything that Glamlight do is fun. I mean, they do burger palettes, pizza palettes. Those just didn't appeal to me, but I don't know, I can't get down with a savoury themed palette for some reason, but sweet I can. I don't know why that is. But yeah, it's a super fun concept. It's taking something that's everyday and making it into makeup and just being playful with it. And yeah, I kind of love that they're doing that and that they're not doing the same as everybody else. They've got their niche, and it is, yeah, super fun. Okay, and last up, number 8, if I would pick an eyeshadow palette in my collection that represents inspiration. Well, that's difficult because when you've got nearly 300 palettes, a lot of them in my collection inspire me, and all for lots of different reasons. But when I got this particular one, and I think a lot of people will say it just is super inspiring because it's the mix of colours that I would perhaps want in a palette if I was choosing for myself. So that always helps it to be inspiring. It's got super metallic shimmers, and it's got beautiful dual tone mattes. I am of course talking about the Kaleidos Makeup Angelica Lyremar Club Nebula palette. I mean, before you even start, it's inspiring just the way that it's packaged, and it just makes you want to pick it up because it's just so beautiful. And I've done quite a few looks with it already. I think I've done 5 looks maybe, which for me, if I don't film all that often, if I'm making that many looks with one palette, and when I've got so many in my collection, makes you realise that it must be quite inspiring. So I'm sure it needs no introduction. It's been all over YouTube. Every colourful makeup eyeshadow lover has been using this palette, but it is super inspiring because of the mix of colours that are in it. I always want to pick it up. I've got so many more ideas of things that I could do with this palette actually, but you know, you've got to vary things up as a YouTuber. You can't keep filming with the same one again and again. But honestly, I could think of so many looks from this one that I would like to do. So that's always key to knowing if it's a inspirational palette for me. But I had to give a special mention to another palette, and it's only at Halloween time that this one really gets busted out. But every year that I use it, and I've had this palette in my collection I think 4 years, it's the first one I think of that I want to use and I want to get creative with it. And it's the LA Splash Classic Horror Palette. Again, the packaging kind of inspires me to pick it up because I love the whole aesthetic. It goes right onto the back as well. But it's the mix of tones that are in here just really inspires me. It's a grungy rainbow. It's all matte, but the shades are just, there's something slightly off about the tones of each of them. And I don't know why, but always like take it to the next level in terms of creativity whenever I pick this palette up. And some of my favourite looks I've ever created have been with this palette. So it's super inspiring to me, and yeah, just really love it. And it was a good one to finish on, I think. So this is quite hard to nail it down. I feel like if I'd have filmed this on another day, then I could have answered in a very different way, because it just depends on my mood and how I'm feeling at the time. But these are my picks on this day, and I think I'm quite happy with what I've chosen. Some I could have substituted other palettes out because there's multiples that make me happy. There's multiples that I find inspiring, and there's a lot in the packaging category. So nailing those in particular was quite difficult. But yeah, it was a lot of fun to film. I hope you guys enjoyed me talking about some of my palettes again and me participating in this tag. You'll have to let me know, do you like tags? Do you like to see them? As I say, they're a lot of fun for me to do. So Angelica, thank you for creating such an awesome tag and for tagging me in it. I really do appreciate you doing that. And guys, thank you so much for watching. If you're new to my channel, don't forget to subscribe before you leave and hit that notification bell. I'm uploading 2 or 3 times a week. Most of my content is throwback content at the moment, using things I already own. I'm on a low buy / no buy, trying to be a no buy, but it's kind of turned into a low buy because I get tempted like anybody else. But I'm trying to rein in my spending, but amplify the creativity with the things that I own. So if that sounds like something you could vibe with, I'd absolutely love to have you. But as I say, thank you for watching this one. Hope you're having a lovely day or night wherever you are, and catch you in the next one. Bye guys.